Dr. Elijah Kwasa, a radiologist at Stratus Medical, partnering with Ponea Health. Today we'll be talking about contraindications in imaging. Now, there are many imaging modalities, and each of them have their own relative and a few absolute contraindications. So we'll go through them one by one to try and get a feel of the landscape. So we'll start with one of the most commonest used modalities. This is general radiography or X-rays to those who are not in the medical profession. The issue with these is that they have ionizing radiation. And ionizing radiation in a large or sequentially accumulated dose can lead to things like cancer or cataracts of the eyes. So first of all, we have X-rays to you and me, general radiography as it is called in the medical field. The concern here is that it has ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiation has the risk over a large dose or a large duration to cause certain problems, the biggest concern here being cancer. What do we do to make sure that we are not doing the wrong thing? Number one, we have to make sure that any lady who's getting any radiation modality, we have to be sure she's not pregnant. What does this mean? If they're outside of childbearing age, then we are not too worried. But for a lady who's within childbearing age, we need to know either one, whether or not they're pregnant, and this can be established by knowing the last menstrual period, or if there's any doubt to that, then having a pregnancy test just to be sure. Why? The fear is not so much to the mother, but to an unborn child who may then develop side effects of receiving radiation. The risk of this is heightened when we move to CT, because CT is a higher order of ionizing radiation than plain X-rays. And the same precaution is given. Now, over and above that, we try and limit the radiation, especially to children, because of the accumulated dose that can occur over time. These are relative contraindications, not absolute. Now, there are certain absolute contraindications. For example, someone who needs dye, iodinated dye put into their veins, and they have established compromised kidney function, then we cannot give the dye for fear of causing kidney failure. And so for anyone who's going to get dye, we do need to check the kidney function. A reduced kidney function becomes a contraindication to receiving the iodinated dye. And lack of iodinated dye may prove the study that was meant to be done fruitless. Therefore, it is not a direct contraindication, but looked at in the correct clinical setting, it can be. We move from that and we come to MRI. Now, MRI is an imaging modality where you go into a very high strength magnet to be able to generate some images. There are some absolute contraindications. If you have something metallic in your body that is not fixed, so let us say you are in a war area and there's a bullet or some shrapnel in the body, that can become an absolute contraindication. People who've been involved in the welding industry, sometimes there are little bits of metal that can get lodged in the body without the person knowing. But then when you go into the MRI, that piece of metal can get extracted and it can cause injury as it comes out. The same thing with the bullet. So in such situations, it's an absolute contraindication. For things like pacemakers, these are absolute depending on how critical they are for your function. There are people who have pacemakers that have been disabled. They are no longer relevant. For that person, they can get it done. But if your pacemaker is still relevant to keep your heart functioning well, you should not get into an MRI. And for anyone else who has an electronic device implanted that is necessary for their normal function, what I'm thinking of at this point is implanted insulin pumps, for example, that becomes something of major concern. For someone who's swallowed a foreign body, a child who may have swallowed a coin, this child should not go into an MRI because obviously the coin may be magnetic and may get pulled out. Then there is the contraindication of getting the dye for MRI if the kidney function is reduced. Different institutions have different reference ranges, but it is important to establish kidney function before getting any dye injected into the veins, especially for ionizing radiation procedures, X-ray, fluoroscopy, and CT, and for MRI. Thank you for joining us for this discussion. You can book our services on ponea.com. You'll be able to visit us here at Stratus Medical. Feel free to join us again as we'll engage more in understanding how does imaging affect your life and your healthcare experience. Have a good day.